dark cloud, which is of, everybody now in this entire society feels like they've lost control. Their life is just different. It's not what they're used to. The anchors that they're so accustomed to just don't exist. The gym isn't open. The restaurants aren't open. Their television shows and sporting events that we used to do and watch just don't exist. There's no normalcy. And for most people, there's no way to get that. But for the small subset of people who do what I do, there's some degree of normalcy. And I think that, as much as anything else, is what's pulling people in, because it's the one part of their life that they can control, and that is normal.
Wow, that's an amazing insight. Amazing insight.
Well, I learned it from you, Joe. I learned it from you.
Oh, God, geez.
Learned it from you, Dad. Dr. Ulrich, can you help us understand a couple of things? A lot of people have been asking me or talking about, because they know that all I'm doing is listening to doctors. I've shared publicly many times. I turned off the news 2.5 weeks ago. I'm listening to
smartest thing you could do, right?
What's that?
Except listen to doctors. Yeah.
Well,
I said smartest thing you could do is turn off the news. Yeah.
I'm only listening to Dr. Joe and his guests right now, and they've led me the right way so far. So one of the questions I was wondering, which no one's really given me a good answer, and feel free to say you're not sure and the medical community is not sure, but we started talking about this second wave, right? So people either come out early or, we're not quite through the curve, but are we anywhere closer to understanding whether or not if you've had it once, you're now immune, so you can actually go out and help like the herd immunity is supposed to be set up for?
So I do think the experts, and I am certainly not a virologist or an expert on that level, but what I'm being told by the experts that in fact, there's very, very, very strong evidence that if you've had it, you won't get it again, at least not in the short term, that you have some degree of immunity now. It seems like this virus does change like most viruses do. It doesn't change quite as quickly as, for instance, the flu or others. So the degree of immunity might actually last a little bit longer. If you get the flu in, this year, it doesn't mean you won't get it next year, because the flu that comes next year is a little bit different. But it sounds like, at least what I've been led to believe, that with this disease, it's likely that, you will not get it again in the period of time that we're looking at, which is 9 months, a year, 16 months, something like that, that there really is some degree of being immune to it. Early on, I think there was concern that there may be reinfections, and I remember hearing that. Again, what I've been led to believe from the folks who are really the experts, that there doesn't seem to be the reinfection that they were worried about earlier, that if you get it and you get better from it, you're okay. What they're actually seeing, and this is part of this, is people start to get better, because the front end of your illness is based on the virus itself, and then people start to get better, and then they get sick. And it's not that they're reinfected, but then there's a change. And the second part is as much about your body's response to the virus as opposed to the virus yourself.
So are there some people that aren't having that second wave, or is everybody experiencing a 2 waves?
No, and there's many different ways. The vast majority of people have minimal symptoms. Really, the biggest majority of the people have very minimal symptoms, or if they have symptoms, it's very flu-like. There's a small subset of people who tend to get sicker, and then there's a very small set of those who get acutely, severely ill. But everybody has a different pattern. Some people will have it and never know it. Other people will have it and have symptoms for a short period of time and get better. Some people have symptoms, mild symptoms, for an extended period of time, and some people have more severe symptoms. So there isn't a one size fits all on this one.
Have they figured out why it's one versus the other?
I bet they have. Again, that's well beyond my expertise.
Yeah.
I think they're starting to figure out what it is. I think we're also starting to see patterns of the individuals who tend to get sicker. And what I can tell you is, in my own experience, having now seen, a significant number of people who become very ill, there are certain characteristics, personal characteristics, which have lent themselves to people. And again, these are things that are starting to come out in the data. Some of the known illnesses like chronic lung disease, like hypertension, like cardiac disease, have been shown to be somewhat indicative of people's risk of getting sicker. But also body mass seems to be something that's playing out on this one, that people with high BMI, large, people seem to have a higher rate of serious illness. And smoking seems to be popping up as another risk factor of significance.
So what
which would make sense. Hold on one second, which would make one second, because it would make sense because, if you're overweight, you may already have breathing difficulty. If you have lung disease, you'll have breathing difficulty. And these things, we are recognizing the percentage of why 25% are asymptomatic is going to be fascinating to try to figure out. But talking about the waves and the things come in waves, one of the things that comes in waves in our show are our sponsors. And so it's a wave right now to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Stay right there, Dr. Ulrich and everybody else. We'll be right back.
Hey,
isn't it time you joined the
everybody
club and ordered your own
are live on Facebook.
Join History Lovers.
We're live on
Proud
Facebook
Massachusetts.
too.
I am muting WATD for the time being right now, and you want to catch anybody up for what they missed on what we were talking about on WATD? So we've got Dr. Ulrich from Yale University. Am I saying that wrong?
Like Lars Ulrich
from
I answered it.
Metallica.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
I know, Dr. Ulrich, please. But so I don't know what Facebook missed, but basically, Facebook folks, hi. We're here with Dr. Ulrich, who is major emergency room presence in Yale. And he's telling us a lot about what is going on there in the emergency room and a lot about Corona and COVID in general. And maybe if we have an opportunity, I don't know what your schedule is after 9 o'clock, but if you have a few extra minutes to hang around for Facebook Live, that would be great. If not, perfectly understood. But what we were also talking about to catch people up was that Mark Stiles was on television last night. But we are now coming back to the show.
Hello.
And we're back with the Dr. Joe Show here talking about what everybody's talking about, but getting real good information, real truthful information of how we can help, how we can stay safe and not sensationalize what otherwise we don't want to be watching right now. So back to the show, Dr. Joe.
And I am here with Dr. Ulrich, and it is just amazing to hear what you guys are doing there on the front lines. You were saying that you've seen some folks coming in. I think one of the things that is truly remarkable about this and so sad is that once a person is identified, they literally have to be separated from their family. Is that what you're experiencing?
Yeah, I think that's one of the difficult parts of this that everybody is dealing with around the country who is dealing with disease, is the importance of separating, keeping the hospital closed to anybody who doesn't have to be there. And that includes family and others. So, yeah, it's a situation where people are coming in and being seen in the emergency department, being admitted to the hospital, and unfortunately not having visitors and family members coming in an attempt to sort of limit the exposure, person-to-person exposure. And it does add to the fear for people. It does add to the difficulty for patient staff and everybody. It's being in an environment where you don't have the normal access to the support systems that are so important.
Yeah, and that adds a whole another dimension to this. And again, my heart goes out to all of those people who are managing this and having to struggle with it. Again, in terms of emergency room, can you sort of go through what a process would be for somebody who is not yet diagnosed but suspected? What happens? Do they wait outside the emergency room? What do you guys do?
So it's a great question. I think every place is trying to approach this as best they can. One of the keys to this is really much of the efforts that have gone in across the country in all the departments of health and every healthcare system of trying to educate the public that you don't want to come to the emergency department, you don't want to come to the hospital unless you really have to. And there's really been incredible work locally here in Connecticut and throughout the country of, the healthcare system sort of going in and trying to identify new ways to take care of patients in lieu of sending them to the hospital, sending them to the emergency department. So the entire primary care system has really been asked to do something which is very unique, which is really to do a lot of outreach and a lot of care that doesn't typically happen. So the biggest success that we've seen is the work to keep people away from the hospital. But there are those folks who do have to come because they're sick enough and they can't manage at home anymore. So when people do come, it's sort of a rapid evaluation to determine who we bring into the hospital, into the emergency department for further evaluation, and who we try to see and have them go home from out front without further exposing people inside. So much of what's happening for this pandemic and this disease is trying to minimize, the utilization of the facility, the hospital, the emergency department. A lot of the testing that's come forward has all been outside ambulatory testing. A lot of the triaging and evaluations of people are being done external to the department, external to the hospitals, so that we really, really can try to protect and isolate folks and not have commingling wherever it's avoidable.
And what are the things that our listening audience can take home? If they have this, and this, then they should go to the emergency room. But if they don't, they stay home. If there are 3 or 4 symptoms that people really need to be aware of?
So that's a great question. And there are a number of different, not everybody presents the same as we talked about, and not everybody has the same symptoms. But certainly the ones that seem to be those that appear with patients who become a little sicker are high fevers that don't respond to the typical medications, chest pain, shortness of breath. And I think early on, a number of people have these symptoms and they resolve. For a number of people, they don't, and they get worse. Certainly if you're sick and you're concerned that you are, struggling, then, if you have a physician or a health system to reach out to by a phone, or a lot of places are doing a lot of telehealth visits, that's your first chance and opportunity. But if you certainly, have a significantly high fever that doesn't respond, if you have chest pain, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, those are the signs and symptoms that we want people to come to the emergency department so that we can do further eval and see where they are.
And at what point are you, the vision that I'm having right now is like MASH 4077, where it's real wartime triage. At what point?
Absolutely.
How do you determine? Is it just the people who need ventilators at this point that are coming into the hospital, and everybody else has to wait until they need a ventilator?
So I think it's a great question. I think, and again, not every place is seeing the same degree of surge. Some places it's much worse than others. We're all seeing what's happening in New York and the difficulty that system is having with the number of patients, the number of really sick patients. And that's the concern for all of us, is that the number of really sick patients is going to overwhelm the ability of any health system to take care of them. We are seeing overall numbers of people presenting, which are not, at least locally here, not that high, but the percentage of sick patients is much higher than normal. So That tends to be what we're seeing, and that's a lot because people really are heeding the advice that they've been given, and there's a lot of access to information locally here. There's incredible support systems that are reaching out, and patients are able to reach out for and get information and ask questions and really get triaged to the right place at the right time. So they've done an incredible job here of really managing as much as they can on the outside. So we're not getting a lot of the less sick because that's being handled in other ways. I don't know if other places like New York or Boston or other municipalities are doing as well with that as we are. So maybe those other systems are seeing many more of the less sick. But here, we're not seeing a lot of the less sick. We are seeing more of the significantly ill.
And you think that's because people are staying home for longer?
I think it's a combination of they're heeding the advice, that they are locally following the advice of social separation, that they are in touch with either their own health providers or they're reaching out to some of these information hotlines and asking the questions and being directed to do the right thing. So in many ways, I think we've been incredibly successful. We were prepared for certainly a higher volume of the walking well, as we call it. And we have not seen a lot of that. We're prepared. We have the tent set up. We have the external space to handle that. We have not yet met the volume of that that's pushed us to the limit. It's still possible. I don't think we're at the peak yet locally. We still have a little bit of time before we, I think, peak on what we're going to see. But we certainly have not been inundated to the degree that other places have with the walking. We are somewhat heavily inundated with the very sick.
Well, I wonder if that's because the walking well are afraid to go near the hospital right now.
I think that's probably true. I think not only are the walking well with this illness not coming, but a lot of the walking less ill that we would see for any other entity is also staying away. I think people really are afraid to come. I mean, you know, it's a mixed. It's interesting having a lot of conversations with our staff and the nurses and the other folks working. There's a real incredible sense of pride of what we do and what people are doing. But at the same time, a lot of people are feeling like they're identified as, you know, a source of the infection. So they feel very uncomfortable going out in public in scrubs or being identified as a healthcare worker or somebody who works in an emergency department, because I think there really is a perception, to some degree correct, that, you know, there's a higher density of illness in and about a hospital. And if you don't have to be there, you don't want to be there.
Right.
So we've got 1 minute left. The Dr. Joe show is based on the IM approach, and we can talk about that later, but there are two rules. The first rule, small changes can have big effects. What small change can you recommend to our listening audience, Dr. Ulrich, that can have a big effect for them?
I think part of it is, you know, the change in behavior is huge. I think we're being asked as a society to act and think totally differently than we ever have before. And I think that's an important message, that as difficult as it is, as scary and as painful as it is to sort of socially isolate yourself for now some period of time, I think that's a behavior which is going to be the big savior here, which is really going to help us minimize the effect of this disease. And I think that's one thing that I clearly would recommend, that heed the advice. Don't underappreciate the importance of social isolation right now. As difficult as it is, it really, really, really is effective.
And the second rule, you control no one, you influence everyone. What kind of influence are you hoping to be, Dr. Ulrich?
I think that's a great question. I think I hope that I am able to message and that I'm heard by the people who are affected by this disease. I think I'm also, I think in my role of what I do and who I am and the sort of the number of years that I've been doing what I do, what I call a gray hair at work, that I'm able to actually influence people by helping them understand that as scary as this is, as frightening as this is, as new as this is something which we're ready for, that we're going to handle it, and we're going to get through this. And we're going to look back on it and have learned a lot.
Wow. Thanks, Dr. Ulrich. All right, everybody.
So much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite.
You did a great job. Okay. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week.
You.
Bye.
So,
all right. So we're still on Facebook.
And now switch me to the computer.
Because I took WATD out. Oh, but the doctor left.
Am I muted?
Not anymore.
Nope.
Doctor left.
I'm going to give him a call and see whether he wants to.
So we're still on Facebook.
I know.
I want to see if he could just jump on the Zoom itself.
Right.
With his phone.
Yep. I'm going to call him right now.
That was really interesting, you guys. I learned a lot. The one thing I wanted to ask that I didn't in my notes was the testing. Like, where are they with the testing?
Right.
Can you just get one now? Can you go to the convenience?
Hey, Andy. Hello. Is that cool?
Hey, Dr. Andy. Dr. Andy and Dr. Joe.
Hello.
Dr. Joe and Dr. Andy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Wait a second.
Man.
Wait, I'm still on Facebook Live. Do you want to? Why don't you guys do this?
Who's the dude with the cat?
Hold on. I gotta mute my thing here. Sorry. Hold on. I'm muting.
Why? We're still on Facebook Live.
I know. I'm just talking to Dr. Ulrich. 1 second.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk to Thomas for a minute.
Well, talk. Right. Do you want to?
Thomas, what's going on, man?
Doing good. I mean,
are you socially spacing?
Yeah. So really just hanging with my brother and sister-in-law. Caught up on Tiger King.
You know, everyone's talking about that. What is that?
Hold on 1 second. It's Dr. Ulrich on speakerphone, and he is live, Facebook Live on the Dr. Joe Show.
What do you get when you get a millennial, a Gen Xer, and a boomer all together?
Right. So here, say that again, Mark.
What?
The millennial and all that stuff.
Oh, what do you get when you get a millennial, a Gen Xer, and a boomer all together?
What?
The Dr. Joe Show.
Nice.
It's been fun. You were really, that was really informational. It's nice that we were able to actually give the viewers, the listeners at least on ATD and some of the viewers on Facebook, an inside look at what's going on. I mean, some of the stories coming out of Italy are so frightening when they started saying, if you're 80 years old, you've had a good life. Sorry, we're not gonna, we're not gonna choose you to come in and be saved when this 45-year-old is here. It's so bizarre. I can't even get my head around it.
Yeah, it is. What's interesting though is we are now looking at something, that this part of the world hasn't had to deal with for hundreds of years. Much of the world, much of the third world actually does this all the time, right? There's limited resources in there. They distribute resources regularly in that thought process, but we've never had to do this because we've had unlimited resources. Part of this, I think, as we get through this, we're going to learn that this is a reality of the world, and I think it's going to open a lot of eyes to hear what it means to have and distribute healthcare resources. Well,
you talked about the flu, and you could get the flu shot, but every flu strain is a little bit different. I mean, if this is the case with the coronavirus, that every year here comes the corona season, everybody shelter down.
Yeah. Where's the starting line? Like, how many cases have to prop up before we do this again? I think it's like, should we have some sort of metric to go by? Like to set a policy of like when we have, say, 500,000 cases, that's when or probably long time before then. But
I think that those experts who actually do that and track diseases are all over that, and I'm sure that they're looking at and anticipating what this is going to do, what it's going to do now, what it's going to do in the short term, and what it's going to do in the long term. So yeah, absolutely, I think this is they're well prepared and anticipating that this is not going to be a one-time event. And I think going forward, they're going to start to identify how to track this disease and how to predict when it's going to come back and at what degree.
So here's a completely a question that can only be answered with speculation. But why now? Why do you think this is happening now? I mean, we've had viruses. We've lived next to viruses for millions and billions of years. Why do you think this is happening like this to this extent now?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think there's there's.
Wait, is that Colleen?
Yeah.
Well, would you bring your wife into this? Because she's usually, you know, my wife was here. I know she's smarter than me, and I know that she's smarter than you, Andy. So,
yeah.
what's your think of this?
So that's a great question. I mean, this is only on a personal answer. This is not coming from any degree of expertise.
That's fine.
Else. But I think it's a combination of things. I think it is somewhat of a different disease. I think it's different enough from previous viruses that it's acting different. I also think the world has never been so small and open as it is today. Think if this disease came 30 years ago or 40 years ago, it would have stayed where it started, right? It never would have gotten here from China because there wasn't that kind of open sharing. And I think the world now is so small and there's such open movement that anything now that's like this is going to spread like wildfire.
Right.
And I think that's part of just the social nature of the world these days. As for the disease itself, I just think it's, I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about it. That's not my expertise, but I think the people who know enough about it are just, you know, saying that this is something that's different enough from what's been seen before, that it had a different sort of path. It had a different journey. I do think a big part of this one that really was that people have identified of what made it spread so much different than previous ones was, as we talked about, there's a longer duration of being asymptomatic and having it and being infectious than in previous ones. And that's a big part of how this is getting transmitted. Yeah,
I think it's important for our listeners to know that really this could have started anywhere. I don't want people to say, well, it's, you know, the China disease, because that is absolutely the worst thing that we could do at a time like this is begin pointing fingers and trying to blame people. I mean, if you are going to point a finger, make sure it's washed. But this could have started anywhere. But you know, Dr. Ulrich is right. This is an incredibly sneaky virus. I mean, it's really good at what it does by not having any symptoms in 25% of the people, as far as we know. It basically can like sneak right up on you.
Iceland came out with a report, and they've been very good about testing their population, that 50% of the people had it and had no symptoms at all.
Wow.
50%.
Can you imagine that? That's wild. Now, what would be?
This is the makings of a great science fiction movie.
It's a great science fiction movie, but what I really.
If you took this virus and actually made it like Ebola, you would wipe out the world.
Yeah, you'd wipe out the world.
You would have it. You would know it. You would transmit it.
So if the CCP's listening, there you go.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the part that is just mind-boggling to me is what it really means to reach herd immunity. That billions of people are going to need to have this for us to have any chance. But what is also really interesting to me, and I know that people are beginning to look at this, is what is it about those 25 to 50%? What is it about their biological domain that they can harbor this virus with no symptoms? If we can capture that instead of a vaccination, but if we can capture whatever modulation we need to make in a biological domain, so you can carry this with no symptoms, that could save the world.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of work going on with that. I think they're trying to identify, you know, what it is about the individuals who get sick and what it is about those who don't.
Yeah.
And I think they're trying to extract out is there something in there that's seroprotective? I certainly don't know that, but it's amazing how much work has gone on this in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
And how many resources are being put towards this.
Yeah, which just shows the resources are there when we have an emergency and we need to do it. I wish we,
Or you just print money. But
money printer go brrr.
How I have a question about the testing. So if some people go through this virus not being that one part section, some are on ventilators, some die, some have chest pain, some really don't even know they have it. Can you test to determine if you had it yet? Because I know a lot of people would feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, we got a Facebook question about that.
Yeah, I think they are developing testing for immunoglobulins to determine if you hadn't been exposed, and I think there's a lot of work going on there. Certainly not my area of expertise at all, but I think there's some hope in the future of being able to identify those who have been exposed, who had the disease, who are now protective and can return to the workforce and can, not be at risk of getting sick.
Yeah. There's going to be so much research coming out of this. I mean, wouldn't it be interesting if, and this is completely hypothetical, if you had a patient who was asymptomatic and had COVID, and then you could take some of their blood and give it to somebody else and basically immunize them. I mean, that's,
there's a lot of hope that that's possible.
Right. I mean, that's the early immunization things with Jenner years ago was he basically had people who had cowpox, and they took the cowpox out of a pustule and basically injected it into other people and tried to protect them from smallpox. Yep. So it's part of the way we do medicine is one person's immunization and immunity can protect somebody else. That's what being a social animal is all about. It's kind of cool.
Guys, I got to wrap up on my end. I think this was awesome. I appreciate you, and I can't wait to get back on the show with Dr. Ulrich, even if it's just the Facebook.
Even especially when you pronounce his name right. He's
you are shit with names.
when you pronounce his
I tried
name
so hard.
He worked so hard. But I just want to let our Facebook fans know, if you're listening, tomorrow may be a live show.
Maybe, no, there's no maybe. We're either doing it live or we're not.
But it's not at 8 o'clock. It's at 1 o'clock.
1 p.m.
1 p.m.
Eastern
live.
Standard.
1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
But is it
live?
Family approved?
Nope. Well, if your kids like funny words, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Or if you're feeling somewhat liberated while you're home with your family and you want to just
that's a good point. Because our guest is the John McAfee of McAfee Antiviral Software, calling in from an undisclosed area to talk about whatever he wants to talk about.
And he uses funny words.
He uses funny words that start with often the letter F.
But
S.
But he uses those words effectively. And he is really, really, really smart.
He's brilliant. He's a totally brilliant guy, and it's definitely worth listening to. And we are going to be taking a risk going live on Facebook, even though
no reward.
Even though Facebook also starts with an F. So, guys, until tomorrow, it's the Dr. Joe Show. Hold on. Let me get the music. 1 sec. Stay right there, Andy. Hold on. 1 second. Hold on. We have to do this. It is tradition.
We did do it once on the radio already,
We did?
Well, yeah.
Oh, well, we have to do it again.
All right.
Are you ready?
Take it out.
Here we go.
I got to remember to set up the Zoom for John.
ASAP.
Well, I got one more.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Stay there.
Bye. Thank you, doctor.
Okay.
You.